Hi, thanks for tuning in today to my channel. On this channel, I like to talk about the topics of pornography, sexual abuse, sexual addiction, trafficking, prostitution, and everything in between, and how these things intersect and connect with each other. I've had a great cast of guests from across the world that are experts in their respective field. And I'm very happy to be here with Dr. Mandy Sanchez. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'll just give you an introduction. Mandy is a program coordinator with Culture Reframed. So we're going to talk a lot about their work today. And she holds her doctorate in sociology with a specialization in criminology and women's studies from the University of Hawaii, and has been a professor of sociology and criminal justice since 2013. Mandy specializes in domestic and sexual violence, the intersectionality of gender, sexualities, place and trauma, and justice involved women and children. During her time in academia, she co-founded and remains on the board of the Research Center on Violence at West Virginia University, coordinating efforts to inform progressive policies and practices on and off campus. Mandy has also served as a graduate program director and serves on a variety of campus community boards and collectives dedicated to gender equality and social justice. Mandy is a trained facilitator for the International Inside Out Prison Exchange Program, developing and coordinating programs on trauma and victimization in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. She is also a founder and facilitator of Voices United, the first female think tank and a female federal correctional facility in the US. As Culture Reframe's program coordinator, Mandy focuses on expanding, developing, and ensuring high-quality, comprehensive, impactful programming for parents and adults who are influential in children's and teens' lives. All right, Mandy. Well, once again, thanks for coming. I'm really happy to have you on the channel and for taking your time. I want to really talk about a lot of what I think are important issues that chronically lurk under the surface of the veneer of our culture and are not ever addressed in mainstream media, and yet affect everybody that's watching this. So let's just start with tell us about Culture Reframed and your work there, and how you came to work with them and what your mission is there.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Culture Reframed is an international nonprofit that we work to stop the emotional, behavioral, and sexual harms of pornography to children and youth. And so, what we are trying to do is build resistance and resilience in young people to hypersexualized media and porn through providing education to support, promote, and have healthy child and youth development. So, that's what we do. It's a big task, but we are one of the world's leading organizations and the only porn critical organization that takes a science-based approach to the issue.
Okay, you're not a religious or ideological based organization.
Nope.
What's the driving principles? Is it just science research?
Yep, we let the science and the research speak for itself. We have our founder and president, Dr. Gail Dines, has a PhD in sociology. My PhD is in sociology as well, and so we work with teams of experts in the field. So we're non-religious, not non-political. You know, we have no moralistic stake in the game.
Okay. All right, so a lot of people are watching this and they're thinking, whoa, why do we need an organization of fairly highly qualified and trained academics to address the harms of porn in society? What's the big deal about pornography?
Yeah. So we know that there is an absence of comprehensive competent and really porn critical sex education. And in that absence, porn is serving as a major form of sex education for millions of kids in our country, around the world. And we know that porn teaches kids violence and degradation, humiliation, and they teach that that's the central components of relationships and intimacy and sex. And because mainstream pornography is so widely available, accessible, and anonymous, like it's literally just a click away with any device on any internet connection. We no longer need to go to porn stores, right? It's just everywhere, and it's where the kids are, from social media apps to gaming platforms. So we exist because our founder, Dr. Gail Dines, has long recognized the harms of pornography and really has just dedicated her life to teaching people how to recognize and respond to the role that porn can play in things like sexual violence and unhealthy relationships, habitual uses of pornography that lead into, negative self-image and sexual dysfunction, depression, STIs, injuries, and a host of other issues. So we think that it's very, very critical to have an organization like ours.
So what you're saying is that the ubiquitous use of porn by teenagers is leading to depression, violence, sexual assault. What are you seeing out there exactly? Like, how is this impacting kids, and how much porn are teenagers and kids watching? Like, are you saying minors like are watching pornography? People under 18?
Yeah, so the average age of porn exposure right now is anywhere from 9 years old to 11 years old. And a lot of that
Wow.
exposure is accidental. So it's
Mm,
not like, our minors, our 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds are going out looking for pornography. Oftentimes it's just there, it seeps into, and we use the term hypersexualized to talk about how really overtly sexualized our culture has become. So, what we used to watch at 9 o'clock at night on mainstream TV is now being shown at 7 o'clock, and it's no big deal to see, the lack of clothing and hypersexualized movement and really like lyrics of songs and things like that. So we're seeing that hypersexualization really leads into to pornified images. So kids are stumbling upon this. They are, on gaming platforms, and they're like on Discord. Their characters are becoming hypersexualized. And then you see, if they are following their favorite singers or actresses or movie stars or things like that, you see this link to Instagram and Snapchat and follow me on this. And then we lead into OnlyFans. It's a really quick one click, and I know that tech experts will say 3 clicks, that's all we need to get there. Now it's just really one click for kids to be exposed to a world of that violent and degradation.
Yeah, wow. What is, you talk about the public health crisis of the digital age. Do you have any stats or studies on this? What do you mean by the public health crisis?
Right. So we believe that porn is the public health crisis of the digital age, and it's fueled by that sexual hypersexualized media. So we have more than 40 years of research that is showing that porn undermines the social, emotional, cognitive, physical health of individuals, families, and really even entire communities. So there's 40 years of research. So you can imagine the amount of studies that we have that demonstrate that porn really shapes how we think about gender and sexuality, about relationships, intimacy, sexual violence, gender equality. And so just looking at the ways in which hypersexualized media has affected girls, the American Psychological Association Task Force released a landmark report in 2007. It's the most downloaded report on their website. And they've documented how girls are learning to not just be objectified, but to self-objectify, right? That leads to those increased levels of anxiety and depression, low self-esteem, eating disorders, self-harm, also greater risky behaviors, and puts them at a greater risk for sexual victimization. So the Culture Reframed team commissioned Dr. Sharon Lamb, who helped out in writing the original report to update the study. We have that replicated study on our website. And those findings were definitely replicated, and they also provided some points of intervention for parents and educators and medical experts. But we have, Anna Bridges and her team in 2010 is probably the most widely cited study that we use. Her colleagues analyzed 304 of the then most watched scenes from porn videos, and they found that 90% contained at least one aggressive act, if we're including both physical and verbal aggression. And those aggressive acts were what we see in mainstream porn: gagging, strangulation, spanking, slapping, name calling, and verbal degradation. So her team has recently updated that study, replicated the findings. They're going to be released this year. And so 90% in 2010, what do you think those numbers are now?
Yeah.
100%. Like, that's
Same
what they
higher.
found.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So from 90% to 100% in 10 years. And so people say, okay, what? So what? Porn is violent, but who cares? Right. So, or we don't watch this, or we don't see this, or that's not what we're seeing, but that is mainstream, right? That is what we're seeing. So you've got Paul Wright and his colleagues that have done those meta-analysis for over 25 years. I think they did 20 studies from 7 different countries, and they found that porn consumption is associated with increased likelihood of committing those verbal and physical sexual aggressive acts. And that's regardless of age. So they also showed that positive association between porn use and attitudes supporting violence against women. So these meta-analysis, right, these conglomerate of studies put together, there's even more on the brain, right? So you've got Gary Wilson's Your Brain on Porn website that show that 30 peer-reviewed studies since 2011 are saying that pornography does have negative and detrimental impacts on the brain. And so, and we always say the tobacco company has argued for years that their products, there's no association between smoking and lung cancer. Well, so too has the porn industry. Like, they've been arguing against the 40 years of research that we have that document these effects.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the tobacco industry, because it seems like that's a good comparison to where we are, in this discussion, like on a sociological level, where the general public isn't really aware at all. And then you have a small section of sort of academia and even among mental health professionals that dismiss porn. It's not addictive. It's not a problem. These are overstated. There's no actual causal relationships between viewing porn and violence, for example. But it seems like we're on the right side of history on this one, and the evidence and the studies they just keep mounting up. But you can go back to the 50s and see ads of doctors recommending cigarettes to their patients. Believe it or not, they're on the internet. Go check it out if you don't believe me. And they tried that for what, good 20 years or so, and then they just couldn't maintain that anymore, right? So where do you think we are now? Like, are we like 1960s smoking industry, 70s? Like I remember as a kid growing up, like, they didn't actually have smoke. You still had smoking areas in the same restaurant. Remember that? I don't know what it was like you were, but like, I could be sitting right beside you, and you were in the non-smoking, and I was in the smoking, and the smoking just stopped right there at an invisible line. But it wasn't until what, the 90s that we were finally like, okay. So is that where we are now, or the 80s? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, my background is studying violence against women. And so I kind of relate this to the kind of public awareness around domestic violence. So when we look at, domestic violence in, like, I don't know, the 60s and 70s, we had more of an awareness, but it was still like, it's behind closed doors, like, don't air your dirty laundry. But now, if we think about it, it's not so weird to see domestic violence shelters. We're celebrating Domestic Violence Awareness Month, in October. We're wearing purple. We're really moving into this. It's no longer just a private issue. Now this is a public-facing issue. It's all of our responsibility to do something about this. So we kind of are hoping that we see this movement from porn being, your 1970s Playboy, to, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it doesn't bother us. But I think since the explosion of the internet, that's when we saw a change. And
Yeah.
I think it's where the public consciousness didn't necessarily change, the tech did, right? So the
Right.
porn industry is informing the tech industry, and everybody's, moving in this direction. And now when we look at it, we think, oh my gosh, it's so enormous. Like we could never not think of having an internet, right?
Right.
But I think that we're starting to just now move into this space where it's like, wait a second, this may be an issue, right? And the more and more we're talking to people on the front lines, like child protection agencies and those who work with child sexual assault, we're seeing the influence. We've got medical practitioners who are saying there's something here. We know that teens are, the Surgeon General said this is a mental health crisis for teens right now. Well, we put pornography right up there in a factor of those issues. So we are starting to see a change, and like everything, it's very slow moving. So we're just continuing to push out that awareness. And I feel like we're still in this awareness stage because we have to be, because like you said in the opening, there's so many people that aren't really sure of what porn is and what it looks like, and really the harms that it causes.
Yeah. What's with the secrets? What's with the I think about this all the time, and I'm curious what you think of, like, why doesn't almost nobody want to talk about it? Like it's almost like a collective cultural shame or something. Like, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that that's actually one of the challenges that we have with, coming in and saying, we are critical of porn, we're critical of the industry. We're looking at this, and I think that it's kind of like the trajectory of domestic violence awareness. Not my business what you do on your own time, right? Like if you're
Right.
watching that, that's none of my
Privacy of your own bedroom kind
Yep.
of thing as your
And
thing.
you do you, man. Like if that's what
Yeah.
you want to do and that's what you want to watch. But if you think about it, this is our problem, and as an organization, we're not interested in shaming or blaming anyone for sexual desires, their preferences, but we do believe that there should be a world that empowers young people to really be the architects of their own sexuality, right? Not pawns in some commercial multi-billion-dollar a year industry, right? We're not shaming anyone just because we're highlighting critical issues about the messages that are sent by this enormously powerful and influential industry. So if we can't talk about it, we're basically allowing the porn industry to control the narrative. And when they do that, they just hijack young people's sexuality. So, I guess if you think about the health implications like of the fast food industry and how those arguments are valid, even though individuals are still choosing not to, say, eat at McDonald's, right? We say, if you want to eat vegan or if you want to go eat a burger or whatever, but there's still impacts on us, right? That impact our intimate lives, and we should be especially concerned about those effects for everyone. So I think that that's one of the things, like, not my business, not my porn, but like you said, when we hand over a phone to a kid at 10 or 11 that a smartphone that has access to the internet, you're just opening the door, without any warning about what those kids might be exposed to. So we really believe it's everyone's responsibility. My kids are my responsibility, but so, the neighbors' kids are my responsibility too, as a human in this life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own process of sort of I call it kind of waking up, actually. And I used porn since I was exposed at 10 till my late 30s. I've been 18 years clean of no porn now, 18 years. But when I used to think like here was my critical analysis of porn, okay?
Mhm.
Really hot people that love having sex and getting paid for it. Like, sounds like
Yep.
a great job to me.
Sounds pretty interesting. Yep.
And that was it. Okay.
Right.
Now this is back when it was much different. Okay. And I'm not,
Mhm.
I mean, of course it was still exploitative and degrading and objectifying and all of that, but it
Right.
was much less dark.
Right.
It wasn't industrialized and commodified to the degree that it is now because the technology, I mean, it was magazines when I was young.
Right.
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 And then I started to think a little bit more about it, like after I became a therapist, and I started my own recovery from that, and started to step back, because when you're using, and I think this speaks to the issue a little bit of the question I asked you earlier, like, are you going to go to a symposium and hear a speaker give an objective opinion about the harms, let's say, of cocaine, who is
Mhm.
themselves a cocaine addict?
Mhm.
I'm going to be kind of on that one,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Or someone that talks about how alcohol doesn't really affect your brain.
Mm.
That's an alcoholic,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So there has to be a large percentage of academics and professionals and therapists and psychologists that are using pornography, if
Mm.
not compulsively, if not to a high degree.
Mhm.
So I know because I've worked with enough guys over the last 12 years that you're in a fog when you're doing that. You are
Right.
not
Right.
seeing clearly, right?
Mhm.
And as I came out of my fog, and it was actually Gail, if you're watching this, thank you again. I've thanked her before, but for writing that book, Big Porn Inc. Pornland. No, Big Porn
Pornland.
is Melinda. Thank you, Melinda,
Yeah.
for
Pornland. Mhm.
Pornland, because my eyes went like this.
Yeah. Mine did too.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way she tied it all together,
Mhm.
and she comes at it with a radical feminist analysis, which was new to me.
Mhm.
I'd never really heard that articulated very well. And I started to realize how, and for people watching, I want you to know this, okay? The demand for porn is so great that they can't make enough of it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
You're
that's,
right.
that's
Mhm.
what's going on. So they have to traffic people.
Yep.
Yes, I'm talking about actual slaves
Mhm.
under false pretenses to entrap them.
Yep.
So typical scenario will be, transporting some women from some broke shithole country in the Middle East like Moldova. No
Mhm.
offense if you're from Moldova, but it's a rough place.
Mhm.
And they bring them here and they take their passport away and they say you owe us $50,000 for, and they think they're getting a waitressing job or a dancing job or something, and we're going to put you in a room and you're going to have sex with 8 guys a day, and
Yep.
we're going to film it. So that's where your porn is coming from,
Yeah.
right?
Your
Not
amateur,
all of it.
your
Yeah,
amateur porn that is
right.
now like the
Yeah,
top
yeah.
search
Sure,
porn. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And oh, but they look happy. Well, that's because they edit the parts out where they're crying and asking them to stop, dummy,
Right.
right? Well, they
Yep.
look like they're smiling. Well, they're told to, or they're not going to get paid,
Like won't get paid or food or whatever it
or
is.
food, or
Yep.
their drugs because they
Mhm.
get them addicted,
Mhm.
or they'll hurt their kid, their 5-year-old kid will be hurt.
Right.
So all of that is going on underneath the surface. So I think people need to know that.
Yeah.
And it's not like, sure, sometimes it's a couple in their bedroom and they're like, let's make a porn movie and they want
Right.
to post it on the internet. Fine. Okay.
Right.
I have my thoughts on that as well.
Mhm.
But for our conversation, that's not really what we're talking about here. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
we're
we're
talking,
talking, yeah, we're talking about an increasing number of people, not just from another country, but just here in the United States,
yes.
those
Yes.
kids that are runaways, those kids that are on the street, we're seeing increasing, especially boys, young boys, we're seeing them trafficked into situations in which they're they're being groomed by porn. Like porn serves as the number one groomer for child sexual assault. And so this is oftentimes what you see, where you see the links between trafficking, prostitution, and pornography. It's all linked. It's all a part of the same game. It's all there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I'm wondering, how do you get your message across to like I'm thinking teenagers, I'm thinking you got to go into all the schools. Are you just online? Like, do people have to hear about you and send their kid? Like, you got millions of kids in high school. How do you get this information to them? How are you getting this curriculum out there?
Right. So we really have a twofold approach to how we work to get the message out, because we really want to reshape that public conversation to view porn as the stealth public health crisis that it is, rather than the moral failings of individuals. So we're working with parents and those in the educational, legal, medical professions. We work with them first to educate them about the harms of pornography. So we think we center kids, youth and young people are in the center of our mission, but we work with all of those people around kids because we know how hard it is to get into schools, especially in this country. We have had fights about, sex education since sex education became a thing, but especially in the ultra politicized, polarized space that we are in, especially in the United States.
Yeah, it's getting that way in Canada too. It's getting so political.
Right. So even to get in to schools to speak to kids is a huge barrier for us. So
it is still, is it?
It is. If we can't get in, then we need to come up with another solution. And our solution is let's work with everyone who comes into contact with kids who has an influence on their lives, because the research shows that those people are the key protective factors in reducing risky behavior, right? So if we can't get to the source, let's get to all of those people around. So let's talk to parents, let's talk to pediatricians who have a responsibility on child visits to ask about pornography. And I get it. It's 20 minutes. We've talked to so many pediatricians throughout the last few years, and they're saying, but I only have 15, 20 minutes and I don't have it within my script. And we're like, change the script, let's just ask about social media use. What are they seeing on there? What are they doing? And oftentimes when they ask, kids tell, kids are just saying, because it's so normalized for them that it's not a big deal to be like, yeah, I'm on Pornhub. Yeah, no, I want, like that. Or I see stuff on OnlyFans, or I see stuff on my Discord when gaming or whatever it is. So asking the question becomes such a key piece of what we do. So we implore those that are around kids and youth to ask those questions. So we're talking with judges, we're talking with attorneys, we're talking with forensics, those not just coming in after the fact, but those that can be preventative forces with kids. And we're also on the second level approach that we have is that kind of macro systems level change. So we really work with national and international bodies that are charged with providing healthy environments for young people. So we're advocating and supporting things like age verification regulation of these multi-billion-dollar pornography and social media companies to try to prevent young people from accessing their media. We always say, our message is framing young people at the center of this. We're not morally shaming people for their use, but we have to start with kids. And I think the message is porn harms kids. You can do something, this is the message. And so we really implore, like I said, that kind of network around kids. So trying to create, and what we've done is create 2 successful courses for parents that kind of walk them through that landscape. We were talking about, parents might not know what this looks like. It's not the 1970s Playboy.
We do a screen share, Mandy. Keep talking, or just a screen share of your website.
So
here's your parents program. Sorry.
Yep. Yep, that's the parents program. So we have two courses. There's one for parents of tweens, which are kids 9 to 12, and then we have one for parents of teens, age 13 through 18. And we have a team of experts that develop these programs. And so we're walking parents through not only the landscape that their kids are in right now, but all of the changes that kids go through developmentally, socially, psychologically. And we're reminding parents of, like, this is what you were going through too. But we talk about things such as, navigating the online world and online and offline friendships. And we're really, with each of those modules, we're saying, here's how to talk to kids. Here's some scripts, because when we talk to parents, they're like, okay, education check, awareness check. What the heck do I say? Like, what am I supposed to say to my kids? So we
Got some
actually,
scripts there, that walk
yeah,
them through that, right?
yeah, we actually give them scenarios and we walk them through scripts, and we even do like the teenage lingo of like, mom, I don't want to talk about this right now, or oh my gosh, you're so embarrassing, like how to continue to have that conversation. And we say, 100 1-minute short conversations, usually when you're driving in a car, so your kid doesn't have to necessarily look at you in the face, and you're asking things about, what do you do on social media, and who are your friends, and do you ever talk to them live, and do they ever ask for this kind of information? So we're talking about online safety. We're asking them to become digital media literate. We're asking them to really be critical about what they're seeing. And I mean, even saying things like, yeah, that song has a good beat, but did you hear what they said? Like, what are they saying, and what does that mean to you? So having those conversations. And then what we find through research is that kids want to have the conversations. Nobody's asking, so if no one's asking, right? They want to know about their body.
They're wondering. They're
Yeah.
curious.
They're
Right?
naturally curious, right? It's built into their DNA to want to know about what my body's doing. Why am I feeling this way? What's it going to be like when I date someone? What do you do on a first date? What do I do if someone asks me to send them a picture? And are you okay? And so it's a place for parents to really meet their kids where they are, but then to also say, like, this is our family value. This is what we want from you, and this is why we want it. And without being, scared or shamed or blamed or confused, I always tell parents, it's not going to go well the first time. Like, you're probably, it's probably going to go as well as what you think it is, because we're scared too, but I think that if we realize that kids want to know this, and why wouldn't they want to know this from their parents? Like, be your kid's expert. Don't
You have kids?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
me too.
Yeah.
Those talks. Oh my gosh. Like,
So
they
important, right?
talk about this stuff all day long. And then I have two boys, and then I'm trying to
Yep.
talk to them about porn, and like, what's wrong with you? You
Same.
do
Yeah.
this for a living.
Right. Same here. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old. So they're right in each of those stages.
Right,
And,
right in the middle of it.
we hear about, some of their friends have been on, have looked at Pornhub, and they didn't know what they saw, and they were really confused. And the parents are like, what do I do? And then you're, like, then you have this conversation. But even me, I've been doing this for so long and doing parent education. It's hard, and my dinner table, we have lots of different conversations, as you can imagine, but we make it a part of the fabric, because if porn is going to be so normalized, then we're going to normalize talking about it. Like, that's our motto. Like, that's what we're going to do. And as long as parents and other educators can feel, comfortable in having these uncomfortable conversations, like, this is the first step. And I know it seems so small. And it's like, we work so hard just to get people ready to have that conversation. But once they do, kids are relieved, parents are relieved, they might find out about, some early intervention tactics. They might find out, yeah, I looked at that, but I didn't want to anymore. And then you can explain, then you can talk about it. So that open, honest conversation that's super uncomfortable to have, we have to do it. Like, it's one of those, like, kind of life-saving mechanisms. Like, you would not get in your car and let your 3-year-old bump around in the back seat without a seatbelt, right? Like, these are just things that we do as parents, learning how to cross the street and eating your vegetables. And we just have to make this a part of the regular safety precaution as well.
Well, I have a lot of clients that are developed a problematic relationship to sexuality, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
Do you know how many of them tell me? Because I always ask this question, Mandy. I ask, what sort of conversations did you have with parents or caregivers around porn
Yeah.
or sexuality? You know how many have had those conversations?
Probably none. Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
gonna go with 1%. Let's just say none, really.
Yeah. Close to none. Hmm.
So what you're saying is a big deal. I'm
Hmm.
gonna put you on the spot. Okay, so you just walked in, and your 13-year-old boy is on his iPad, and he's on a porn site, and he's watching porn.
Yeah.
Let's okay. Let's go. Let's walk us through that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So say this again, 13-year-old.
Okay, so you're the mom, and you just
Yep.
walked into your kid, and you have a 13-year-old boy, and he tries to put his iPad down or close his
Yeah.
laptop, but
Which is a warning sign. Yeah.
you can tell and hear. So let's say he's closed the laptop, it's now closed, but you saw enough that
Close.
you know he's watching porn. Okay, let's
Yeah.
walk us through what you would say.
Okay. So the first thing that we say is, as hard as it is, we use this compose model, which is also on our website. But the first thing to do is really stay calm. You have to stay as
Yes.
calm as you can
Yeah.
and literally feel yourself taking a breath, right? So you're staying calm, you're taking a breath, and then you walk out, right? You have to
Walk
turn
out.
around, you walk out. You have to
Oh,
turn around and
I
walk
wasn't
out.
expecting that. Okay.
Yep. And that's one of the things. You turn around, you walk out, you
For
compose
you
your
to have a okay, for you to
for you. Yeah.
regulate. Okay.
So you're regulating, you're composing, you're remembering. I'm not shaming, I'm not blaming. Like I need to
Good.
keep
I like
myself
that. I like
under,
that.
under control first. So when you're ready, and that could be 30 seconds, that could be 3 minutes, it could be a half an hour, right? There's no
Well,
time
half an
limit.
hour. That the poor kid's gonna be sweating bullets if
It could be. Yeah, it could be. And oftentimes, like these are things that might happen, but you walk in and you say, we have to have a talk, buddy, and you're going to decide when we have that talk, but we have to have it. Right. And you're asking them to be ready for this talk. And this talk isn't going to be a lecture. It's not, it's just going to be a short conversation with you and me when you want to have it. You let me know, and then you could set parameters. You could say by the end of the night or by tomorrow, and it gives you that space, but it also gives your child feeling like this is on my terms too. Like, I'm not going to get
okay.
yelled at, punished. I think our response is go in, give me that computer, let me look and see what's in, explain yourself to me, and you're grounded and you're never on your
Sure.
computer or your
Yeah.
phone, or
Yeah.
that's not the best way. It's a knee-jerk gut reaction to do that. So when your child comes back to you and he's like, all right, I mean, let's just get it over with. Like, we're ready to do this. Then what we suggest, and what a lot of other clinicians would suggest at this point, is asking those emotive questions, right? How did you feel about what you were seeing?
Mhm.
Right. And you might have to get to what they were seeing, and it's not accusatory or shameful or blaming. It's just, how did you feel about it? And as a parent, you have to be ready for them to say, I felt really awesome. Like, it made me feel really excited. Like those images, what those people were doing, like it made me feel some kind of way. But you also have to be ready for them to say, I don't know, like there was a bunch of different emotions.
Could be a mix, probably, right?
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
be, I felt it was gross and I've never seen people do that, but I kind of
And
liked it
excited.
and I
Yeah.
didn't want to watch it, but
Yeah.
but I kind of felt something inside my stomach, like, and now I feel a little shameful, and now I feel like, oh my gosh, I feel guilty, and so what we're asking parents to do, and this is hopefully after they've, taken a few of our courses or looked through some of our educational resources, that we really want parents to be able to explain the difference between what they saw in pornography as depicted as sex, so we could say porn sex, and then the difference between that and sex that's based on equality and equity and intimacy and connection, right? So
Okay, so
explaining,
you just put the framework out there.
yeah, put the
Equality,
frame
what was it? Equality, intimacy,
equality, intimacy, and connection.
connection.
Yep.
Okay, and then do you
Versus
versus
porn.
Objectifying, like you break that down,
Degradation,
degradation,
violence,
okay.
no consent, no communication, whatever it is that they're seeing, which I'm imagining if they're looking at any mainstream porn, that's what they're going to see.
That's
They're
for
not
sure.
going to see
Yeah.
intimate, like, but they would have to understand the difference. And you as a parent would need to be able to explain, this is what I see as connection, people talking to each other. This is what consent looks like when it's verbal and it's communicated and it's continuous, and you can retract it at any point. And just because you consented yesterday doesn't mean you consent today, right? And your consent has to be manageable in that way. And so we're really remembering no shame, no blame. And this is a hard one for parents, but no punishment, right? Because if we start punishing curiosity, and if we start punishing things that kids really, we don't have a whole lot of control when this industry is seeping into everything your kid is doing, right? So it's like punishing them for eating a cheeseburger that's not real good for you, even though we've told you, but it's like punishing them for the ingredients that have been put into their foods that really a lot of us can't
Or
control.
like keeping cookies in the house and they go and have an
And then there
extra
it is.
4 cookies and then you
Right.
punish
And
them.
you're like, well, I told you you could only have one. And you're like,
I'm
but they're
like, you put them there, right?
but they're right here. Yeah. So, and we're asking parents to really find teachable moments like the ones we mentioned earlier, like the lyrics to the song, or, if you want to know who your kids are talking to or what they're doing on their games, go sit with them while they play the game. This is the one thing that I learned more than anything. Like I ran into, my 11-year-old's room, and, he's playing Madden and talking about, but he got really angry when he was playing it. And I just sit there and I watch him. And then sometimes he's talking to friends, and I'm hearing their voices and I'm like, who
You have
is
the
this?
headset on? The
He
headset?
doesn't have a headset. No,
Oh,
no headset, just it's open.
oh,
So
okay.
then during that, I'm like, who is that? Oh, that's so-and-so from school. And then one time I was like, who is that? Oh, that's somebody's brother and I don't really know them. So then that opens the door to be like, so what do you talk about with people that you don't really know? And what happens when people that you don't really know ask you for your phone number, or, for ways
Yeah.
to send you a picture of your shoes or your house, or, whatever it is. So finding those moments to build on your conversation, then that is where your 99 other 1-minute conversations comes into play. So after you find your kiddo looking at porn, then you find those other opportunities to be like, hey, this is really cool. I listened to this podcast the other day and this lady said something about this. What do you think about that?
Right.
Whenever you pose the conversation and you put it back to your kiddo as, what do you think? Like, I really want to know.
Yeah.
Kids want to tell you what they think, and they have a lot to say. And if we just listen to them, and what to say, and then that's when we can bring them in, and instead of punishing, we can bring them into, what do you think we should do about, like, how do you think love look, what does love look like to you? What do you want your first experience to be like? Because this is what I would want for you. And you can be vulnerable. I think there is a thing, such a thing as oversharing with kids, and you'd have to be age and developmentally appropriate conversations. And our courses do, right, are about that. So we really guide you on what would be developmentally appropriate for kids, but kids are individuals. So, your kid best. And it might be one of those things where you share, like, my first time experience wasn't that great. And it wasn't that great because it's this and this. And I would love for you not to have that experience. I would love for you to, and maybe it's your religion or your family values or your morals. And you say, in this family, this is what we believe, and then that's a chance to really talk about what it is, what your expectations are, but then also having that soft landing, if they don't quite meet those expectations. But what you want in the end is you want your kid to come to you when there's anything that happens that's questionable, right? So if they get a text message from, even a partner that says, hey, send me a naked selfie, or, hey, do you want to do that? They're going to come to you because they're going to know that you sat there with them and asked them about their game when they were 14 years old. And when they were 16 years old, you talked to them in the car when they were learning how to drive, about relationships. And they're going to know that you're the expert, like you're the person that, because if you're not that, then who do you think is, right? It's going to be Google, which is going to lead them into any number of Pornhub, X Hamster, X video. You know, it's going to lead to all
Gonna
of
be
those.
the culture or the
Yeah,
prevailing culture, right? And unless they
right,
go to some like private school or, well, you know
right.
what, even then, it doesn't
Even
matter.
then, yeah,
Our
even then,
culture is very sick in a lot of ways. I'm talking about Western culture. I can't
Mhm.
speak for other ones, but
Right.
we're very sick in a lot of ways in our relationship to. I'm not sure why we haven't figured out a healthy relationship to sexuality.
Yeah,
And as a
yeah.
therapist, Manny, I can trace, I don't know, maybe 80% of all the problems people ever have
Hmm.
to theirs or someone else's dysfunctional relationship to sexuality.
Yeah, yeah, I believe it.
Well, I'm depressed and anxious and I can't trust people. Why? Well,
Yeah.
my uncle abused me. Well, why did he abuse you? Well, he was addicted to pornography. Why was he addicted to pornography? Well, his dad had it when he was growing up. And I mean, it just goes on and
And then
on and
it just,
on,
yeah.
and you can almost follow everything back to that.
Yeah, yeah, and even before I was in this role at Culture Reframed, I was doing that, you know, and I when I say I stumbled upon pornography in my professional and academic career, I really did. I was, you know, in my master's program, I was interviewing women who had left their abusive relationships, and upon leaving, they were
Okay.
sexually assaulted. So
Wow.
we were talking about the, you know, the process of their victimization. And, you know, I'm, you know, just, I don't know, 23, 22 years old. And I'm doing these interviews with these women in a rural southeast part of Ohio. And they're talking about their partner's use of pornography. And, you know, when they start saying, well, I don't know why he would have made me do that. And then they think, and then they say, well, you know, he watched porn all the time. And so it was kind of just an afterthought to them. And I
Right.
kept writing it, writing it, writing it. And so when I go back to my research team, and Dr. Walter de Casaretti was on the team
Hi,
who we've,
Walter, if you're watching
yeah,
this.
hi,
Good
Walter.
guy, Walter.
Um, yeah, my mentor. And so when we go back and we're like, whoa, like something is going on here, you know, something in these, you know, 40 interviews, 45 interviews that we have, almost 80 to 85% of them, these women are talking about the influence of pornography. And so that's kind of where we, you know,
Wow.
stumbled upon this. And we always knew,
Wow.
you know, there was
Yeah.
some issues, but really linking, you know, pornography
Yeah.
consumption and violence against women, especially in that exertion of power and control,
Yeah.
that became key. And so then we started asking, you know, because it wasn't in our structured interview to ask. And so we did, you know, and then, like I said, when you start asking, you hear that connection, you know, it's almost
Yeah.
everywhere, like you said. And we see
Well,
that in the research and we see that in practice as well.
and I just interviewed last week Heidi Olson, who I know you know.
Yeah, she's one of our consultants. We
What a
love her.
gem. What an amazing woman, right? So, for those that haven't watched that interview, she's a forensic pediatric nurse. And
Mhm.
so in other words, she interviews children who were victims of sexual assault or, you ready for this, perpetrators of sexual assault.
Mhm.
Yes, they're 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, perpetrating.
Right.
And she was wondering because it was just a spike in these cases, and
Hmm.
she started asking, and it was porn. Saw porn. I saw that in porn. I was
Yep.
exposed to porn. So I think a little similar to your story, and no one was talking about it. I mean, it took her a year and a half of
Yeah.
trying through various channels to get the hospital administrator to agree to allow that as part of the intake,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And she has
So
done such amazing work. We are working on projects with Heidi right now where we are trying to develop materials for child advocacy centers in the United States about at all different levels, like why it's so important to ask about pornography, and then when you do, what do you need to be ready for? So we are working with a team, like I said, of experts there with Heidi and myself at the lead of that project, and we are so excited that she has been able to really make a difference, and she has led the way in that medical field with that and that clinical consulting. And like you said, we are seeing perpetration as young as 8 9, 10, and what they are doing, they're mimicking pornography. They're mimicking what they're seeing.
Yeah, I spoke with a former police officer a couple of years ago, well, probably before COVID, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he's no longer a police officer, but he spent a year and a half interviewing children 12 and under
Mm-hmm.
that were involved in sexual crimes. And I asked him, um, in what percentage of the cases did you see, and sometimes the children were victimized by adults in the house, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes then they also victimize younger siblings.
Right.
Said, how often did you see porn involved? And he's like, all,
All of them. Yep.
all of them,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
all of them. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and this is why I think beyond awareness, maybe this is another conversation, but going beyond awareness, it's like, what do we need to actually do? Like you talked about we have a bill passed our Senate, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our Senate and our House of Commons, and you have
Yep.
Congress and Senate, right? So it's a little
Yeah.
different there.
Yeah.
So it's passed. Our prime minister, who's okay, not I didn't vote for him. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
The Liberal parties aren't doing anything; they're sitting on this. But I know several states have passed this. So
Right.
what this means is that we've had the capability for a long time, because gambling sites have been doing this, to
Exactly.
verify the age of the person before you go on the website.
Yep.
All the porn sites have this joke of a button that says click here if you're 18. It's a joke.
Right.
Okay. So this seems to be the next logical step to me, in terms of, because all the awareness in the world will only go so far.
Right.
And there's people that are curious. Like I tell my clients, listen, everyone looks at porn for the same reason the first time. They're curious and it's available. So let's
Mm-hmm.
make it not available. We've been doing this with cigarettes and alcohol for 80 years
Right.
or 100 years.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. We definitely.
What's the state of that? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What's the state of that down there with the age verification and stuff? Do you see
Yeah.
that as the next logical step?
For macro level change, I think legislation and regulation seems to be the next logical step, but we also need it. We need age verification for both production and consumption. Right now, we're really focused on consumption.
Yeah.
And I think the production, and for the reasons that you mentioned, the ties between trafficking and prostitution, this influx of popularity of OnlyFans has thrown a huge wrench in everything. But really kind of obtaining proof of age and retaining records for those who wish to produce this sexually explicit material, like that seems to be really logical. But the legislative arm, or the FSC for the porn industry, is really kind of in there saying, no, we don't want this. Like, of course they don't want regulation. Of course they don't want, this type of legislation. But, there are laws on the books that they could just enforce, and I think that that's something too. Like, we do have child protection and obscenity enforcement acts. Like, we do have these 2257 in this country. Another arm of this is class action. We have seen a lot of class action lawsuits against MindGeek, who were the former owners of
they're located in Toronto and Montreal.
Located in Montreal, right? So to hold these platforms responsible for the content that they are producing, but then also, there's a way that and something that I thought of in, a few months ago, the UN they were meeting for the Commission on the Status of Women. And we were in, Dr. Gail Dines and I were invited for some side panels to give, not necessarily testimony, but just to talk about what's going on. So we were at the French side panel, the one for the UK, and Sweden. And so we were really talking there about looking more broadly at defining pornography as non-state torture, really, really looking at what we can do on that scale, so
Certain
not only
genres of it would qualify well, it's literally a genre. Culture porn is a
it
genre.
is literally a genre.
Literally, you can
Category.
literally type that in. Yeah.
It's a category, or pain, or anything like that. And it's not only a category, it's one of the most viewed categories, right? So when you start getting into, what's the most viewed, and these porn platforms like Pornhub and X Hamster, they will publish these statistics. So they'll tell you Canadians need to watch this, or whatever it is, but they will show you that. And so we're really seeing kind of in the last 2 to 3 years a push to hold porn sites financially accountable, because you're never going to talk to them on any other level but business, right? So when you're dealing with a multi-billion dollar industry, you hit them where it hurts, and that's finances. So holding them financially accountable for the violence done to women and children in both production and consumption. And we've seen in the United States, especially, withdrawal of credit card payment systems. So when Visa and MasterCard was like, nope, not going to use us anymore, that had an effect, and it wasn't as long-standing as what we had hoped, but like ending also this corporate social responsibility approach to self-regulation with porn sites. So when porn sites say we'll regulate ourselves, we can't believe them. Like, it's like asking big tobacco, well, you guys regulate yourselves. And we've seen the implications of that, right, over 20, 30, 40 years. So really, we are working on that macro level, that larger level with government legislation and regulation. So we see it as kind of a multi-pronged approach. Like, you can't really do you can't do the micro without the macro. So we have our eye to those things. Like, we know what we need to do in terms of, this public health approach, and that's what Culture Reframed is primarily known for as well, a public health approach to a public health crisis. So defining the problem we have, identifying what the risk factors are, what the cause of it is. We've done that. Like, we're like, check. And then we're in this phase of developing and testing those prevention strategies. Like, what works, what works for parents, what works in education. And then the last prong of that public health approach is really to ensure widespread adoption of this approach. So really promoting and scaling up those programs and policies. That's what we have our eye to do. Yeah.
Just switch gears for a second. And I don't know if how well you can speak to this particular thing, but it's baffled me for quite a while, and that is, as a therapist. So I'm a registered psychotherapist in Canada, but there's a whole group of people among my profession that are psychologists, social workers, and even academics that will defend porn to the death. Like, there's no such thing as porn addiction, and they cite study after study, right? And they write books defending it, and they like to point out that the DSM, the DSM-5 for that. For people watching, it's sort of like the Bible that psychiatrists use. Every known mental illness that you ever heard of is in there. It's changed every few years. And I see some of Gail's posts, mostly like frustrated over the academic on this, but is Culture Reframe trying to engage with this on any level, and like, what do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, we don't have scientists or neuroscientists on staff who research into this specific topic, but we do know it's an active area of study and debate. And I think, that being said, we would emphasize probably two main issues. The first is that studies from those fields of neuroscience and related fields, they're finding enough evidence to support the claim that regular use of porn can lead to brain changes, like I had mentioned earlier, associated with the classic definition of addiction, right? So
Yes.
we do know that. We also know that practitioners are reporting symptoms that are similar to other types of addictions, more concerning for mental health practitioners because of the extreme and far-reaching implications, such as PIED, right? The porn-induced erectile dysfunction, arousal disorders, and they're being reported by women. This gradual escalation to seek out more deviant or violent content, including what we talked about, torture porn, rape porn, child-themed porn, incest porn, which are all categories. And really the destruction of partner intimacy and connection, the effect it has on the way women are viewed and treated in the culture at large, due to the objectification of women that's inherent in porn, and other devastating consequences unique to porn addiction. The second thing is that many men of all ages are assessing their own use of porn as a problem. Right. So that is also what we know. And so do many family members and partners, and those who are that you come into contact. So for most addiction specialists, such an assessment by either the user or their social circle warrants a therapeutic intervention. And so that's where we stand on it. We wish to alleviate and prevent the affliction, the addiction, the whatever it is that you want to call it. There's a ton of studies that are showing that there are properties in your brain that change dopamine receptors, things like that, the neurotransmitters involved that mimic heroin or cocaine addiction, right? So we do know that, and that is something that I mean, just speaking for me, like, and I like to research the research, right? And just speaking on our end, we do know that. We do know that there's changes happening, and when we put that up against the changes that are happening in young people already, and knowing that frontal lobe, that prefrontal cortex isn't even developed until 25, 22, 25. And we see those changes happening because of porn consumption. Whether you call it addiction or not, those characteristics are very similar.
Yeah, and just throw another thought on that too. I never hear the people that defend porn never talk about this, and this is when it becomes a secret in a relationship, and you're lying and deceiving your partner.
Yeah.
And when that comes out, it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal. Okay.
Yep.
And it erodes the foundation of the relationship, which is trust.
Right.
And the way, this is so funny, I heard a guy, the way they get, how they get around that? Well, it's not the porn. It's you have different values about pornography.
Oh, okay.
So Mrs. Partner, wife there, I understand your values about pornography are different than your husband's. So let's talk about that.
Right.
No, let's talk about the fact that you, buddy, were very clear that she was not okay with you jerking off and fantasizing about other women. And you knew that, and you've been doing it for 10 years, twice a day. And you've told countless lies about it. When she's asked you, you've denied it. And you're guilty of lies of omission every day of your marriage. Let's actually talk about that and not deflect it onto her values about pornography.
Yeah, her values.
Oh, it makes me angry.
Right. I see
that.
Yeah. Yeah, justifiably so.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's even worse where therapists are, and listen, if you're a therapist and you're, learning about this and you just really didn't understand, that's one thing. Okay, fine. But you need to educate yourself about what's going on out there. And for you to tell a partner, a girlfriend or a wife or a same-sex couple, I don't care. Well, you know what? Maybe you should lighten up about the porn. Maybe you should just have sex with them more. Maybe you should, no, this is what people are being told. Maybe you should watch it with him. So,
and do what he sees.
and then just go along with it. So you're gaslighting her and re-traumatizing her and reinforcing her betrayal.
Yep.
Please stop doing this, therapists and mental health workers, if you're watching this. Don't please
Yep.
stop doing that.
That's exactly what it is. There's no other way to describe what that is. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your biggest challenge in getting, the work that you do and getting the work out? And I don't mean within Culture Reframed itself, because well, when you're working with people, there's always
Yeah.
personalities and stuff and people, but like what are the challenges that you're finding? And there just seems to be so much cultural resistance to this. What are you finding are is it the big bureaucracies? Is it getting through to the decision makers and the change makers? Is it getting people to listen to you? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I all of it,
All of
as you
it?
can
Okay.
imagine. I mean, when we have Culture Reframed, our name says we are trying to reframe the culture, and we get, but why? Like, what's wrong with it? Like, what's the big deal? So I think that becomes a major challenge. Like, most people understand the concern that we have when we frame this issue about kids accessing pornography. But they also then think, well, adults should be free to view whatever they want, right? We often come up against people on one hand believing that we shame people for their sexual desires and preferences, which I think I've clearly stated, we're not shaming or blaming anyone for those preferences or sexual desires, right? But we're talking about kids and not raising kids so that they're pawns of a commercial porn industry, right? And again, we're just trying to highlight these critical issues that we very much need to talk about it. On the other hand, I think I mentioned this before, people claim that, well, I don't watch it. So, so what are you talking about? It doesn't affect me,
Okay.
so this doesn't affect me. So even if you don't personally watch porn, you certainly have a stake in how porn influences other men and women who interact with you, who interact with your sons, your daughters, your wives, your partners, your mothers, your relatives, your friends, right? So you might not drive, but you certainly have a stake in people obeying the speed limit when when you're crossing the street. Also, I think a challenge is the claims that we're anti-sex, we hear the argument all the time, but what about the good porn? Or
Ethical porn.
the ethical porn, right? Or the feminist porn. So that's a challenge. I mean, we are pro-sex. And if you're pro-sex, you have to take a critical stance against porn. If you cannot be pro-sex and pro-porn,
Well, what's your response to that really quickly then? At the ethical and feminist porn, what would your response to that be? And get
I
through
would
it.
I would say that we believe people should be free to develop their own authentic sexualities without relying on a script provided to them for anyone without profit or motive. Once you put the profit motive into the mix,
Mm,
it's inherently unequal, like, and especially with women, right? So we're really trying to get people to reclaim their own sexuality for themselves, because often what they don't realize is that they too have been hijacked by this industry message,
sure.
right? By saying, oh, but this is ethical. Oh, but consent is, here. And this is and there's women producing porn. Well, some of the most violent porn that we've seen are produced by women who
Really?
are claiming,
Yeah.
who are claiming ethical porn. So, it's really trying to bust those myths, right? So when you go into any of the major tube sites like Pornhub, blah, 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 you'll see that their own terms and conditions, that they're not even following their own terms and conditions, because they don't verify age, they don't verify consent for user uploads. And we just continuously tell people sex without consent is legally called rape, in any way that you slice it. So when you have a blurry or gray area of consent, which is all good porn, ethical porn, feminist porn, if you can't clearly see that, then it's not consent. Like, then it's not real. Like, that's not real.
Right.
So we really say, we really want to know, like, we want you to have good sex. Like, we are a bunch of feminist women who are definitely pro-sex. But that's not but we can't be pro porn and be pro sex, because the most anti-sex agency that exists is the pornography industry. So, really trying, I think what we do is we're those kind of cultural mythbusters. I remember that show Mythbusters, that,
Masters, yeah.
that the science shows that you used to watch. So, we're busting myths at all these different levels. And another one is that parents and even some professionals that think that talking about sex or pornography will actually encourage young people to seek it out. It's like the common sex education in schools,
Right,
controversy that if we talk about it, then they'll do it. When so many kids have such unfiltered access to the internet, seeing porn is inevitable.
yeah,
It's like saying that you're going to take your kid to New York City, but they're not going to breathe polluted air.
right,
Like that doesn't even make sense, right? So if you want them to come to you, you want them to come to you if they see porn and with questions and concerns about sex, then you have to have those conversations, right? You have to talk about what porn is and you have to talk about what it does.
yeah,
And if you don't talk to your kids about porn, the porn industry will. Gail says it almost at the conclusion of every presentation that we give. You have to do it because you can't leave it up to a profit-seeking multi-billion-dollar industry to
yeah,
tell your kids what they should want about sex, how they should want sex to work out. Because if you do that, then you'll see what Heidi sees,
yeah,
in clinical practice, where you have perpetrators that are 7 years old perpetrating against 3-year-old
yeah,
siblings,
yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Any personal motivation you want to share about just doing this work? Like apart from sure it's fascinating, the academic interest and is there any personal story behind this? Like for me, it was fueled by my own exposure to porn and using it and then my own recovery out of that. And
Yeah.
then, as in my work working with people, and then realizing, all the connections. So I think for me, that's a big part of where that comes from. But how about you?
Yeah. Well, which is remarkable. And I commend you for that. I appreciate the work that you do every day. I would say this is pretty easy. And it's 2 words, my kiddos. As a researcher and professor, and I don't know, a social justice warrior, I would say that I'm really passionate about issues that affect our future generations. But as a mom, I just have this unending devotion, like many other moms, to my children and to their future. And I also have really high expectations for them. But after years of just researching the harmful and devastating effects of porn on especially young girls and women, I wondered how we can expect these kids to form healthy relationships as adults or to be future leaders of the world when so much of this is being told for them.
Mm,
Um, and so I left my university position a year before I could apply for tenure, because I wanted to do more and be a part of the solution. And I get to live this every day. And I work with amazing people who lead the fight every day, for very similar reasons. So I was able to make that decision to go out, and it was probably the easiest one I've ever made.
really,
Yeah,
really. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I find the people that I talk to in this space really are motivated by passion, calling.
mhm,
It's like a calling, really.
yeah,
I don't even know sometimes why I do. I mean, just my YouTube channel is a passion pro. I don't make any money off of this, right?
right, yeah.
I'm not paying you any money. We're
Yep.
just here because we have a passion for this and we feel it's important. So, yeah, what are you most proud of in your work with Culture Reframed?
Oh my gosh, can I say
Not just
can I say
brag, just brag
everything?
for yeah, brag as much as you want. Be shameless.
Oh gosh. I would say everything we do at
Yeah,
Culture Frame, and really, like, it's really not a choice anymore. Yes, it's passion, but what choice do we really have? Like, we can bury our heads and act like, these issues don't exist, or we can be part of the solution. And so I guess I'm proud of the work that we do with parents and the real changes that we see happening with them. They report to us, they email us, they talk about what the courses have done and how these conversations has really changed. I'm proud of the research that we support and that we cite that really ground us, to what we're doing. maybe the collaborations and partnerships that we forge with child advocacy centers around the country, and just the utterly amazing work that they do each and every day to keep kids safe. And I'm really proud most recently of this new sex education through porn critical lens curriculum that we have launching very soon.
Do you have a hand in that?
Yeah, so we have a team of experts that have created it. It's been a year-long project, and we are ready to launch that. We have it up on a new LMS, so it's going to hopefully really impact educators who are delivering porn critical sex ed with an anti-exploitation framework. So we've done it completely different than our kind of typical sex ed. And so far, what we see from different countries around the world who have been able to take a look at it for us, they love it. They want to implement it. So hopefully, we're getting educators a way in to talk about these issues without getting fired in this country, especially. But
Right.
yeah, and I mean, I'm proud of my colleagues, my team, that I get to call them my team and colleagues, Dr. Dines, our founder and president, for just their tireless dedication and inspiration. And, I guess I'm a little proud of myself for taking the big, huge risk, and jumping and then landing on the right side of history.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. Yeah, it's nice to be engaged in meaningful work, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, not that what I was doing as an educator in a university setting wasn't meaningful. It definitely was. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm still talking with students. I'm still teaching some
yeah,
online classes. This is a different kind of meaningful for me. This is utterly personal, and just utterly important, I think. And then anybody who really takes the time to sit with Culture Reframed and listen and talk about things, I think they walk away with that too. They realize how critical it really is, and how we have to do something, right? We have to do something now. And it could be as small, which I think is huge, as having conversations with your kids, or advocating for this type of legislation and regulation.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up. Don't hang up though. I want to chat after, but
Yeah.
let's wrap it up. And I just want to finish with a word to the men that are watching this. Culture Reframe. When I go through the board and the people contributing are very highly weighted to women, and so thank you for taking up the burden of this. But men, we need to step up. And if you're a guy watching this and you struggle with compulsive porn use or something else, hey, no shame, no blame. Just get some help.
Mhm.
Reach out to me or anyone in your area and be the kind of man that you want your kid to look up to and respect, so that you can have the conversations with your children. Because if men are lost in this themselves, they can't guide their children through that. So I think the first step as a man is to start becoming part of the solution and stop being part of the problem. So that's my challenge to you. And also contribute. If you're watching this and you got a lot of money, kick some over to Culture Reframed. Okay.
Pick
These
us.
people, no one's getting rich doing this. Okay. These people rely on a lot of donations and goodwill, and they probably have volunteered a lot of their time for free before they ever took on a paid position here. Okay. And there's always a need for that. So I'll end on that, and thank you, Dr. Mandy Sanchez, Program Coordinator, Culture Reframed. It's been really great having you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.